Well, let's get started. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is the third stakeholder meeting for the Roth Road Improvement Study. We do have some results and preliminary results to share with you, and we'll be going through that. But first, we'll do some welcomes and introductions. And Ryan, I don't know if you want to take this slide.
Well, I guess I'll just say, just very briefly, just welcome to everyone. This is our second go at having stakeholder input. We've, we took some initial feedback to shape the way we did our initial analysis. We've gone and done some work, and now we're coming back to you with that. And so you can see that this is a project that is a kind of a joint effort between the County of San Joaquin, Lathrop, City of Manteca, and San Joaquin Council of Governments, and you see our consultant team there. So I won't belabor that. Let's go ahead and get into the info. Okay, will do. And just real quick, I'm Jim Damkowicz with DKS. I am the project manager for the consultant team. I have Garth and Sean from our staff who's going to help me present this information today, and we also have Aaron Silva from Mark Thomas, who will be providing a presentation as well. I do want to point out that we do have a urban economist with us, and his job actually kicks in probably within the next week, and I'll touch lightly on what he's going to be doing as part of this project. So just real quick, I want to reiterate the project goals. The goal is to identify a transformative package of prioritized improvements that will facilitate freight movements, rail operations, and overall circulation within the Roth Road study area. The area is going to experience a significant amount of growth, primarily traffic growth, and we'll get into that in a minute. And so this study is trying to get ahead of that and get a funding plan and some strategies to move forward to make sure that the roadway system can accommodate that growth. Another big objective is to divert unwanted truck traffic off of Lathrop Road primarily, but there's others, Louise and Airport, and allow the local agencies who own those facilities to facilitate their own local general plans and provide a safer environment for the folks who use those local roadways. And last but not least, examine the possibility of forming a joint powers authority amongst these three local agencies as a mechanism to help fund improvements that we identify in this plan. So here's our study area. Be really quick about it. You have Roth Road here, Airport, everybody should be very familiar. This is Lathrop Road. At this point in time, there is a lot of trucks that who want to go southbound on 99 that work their way down and end up traveling on Lathrop Road. That's been the big issue. And there's two at-grade rail crossings on Roth Road. That's these two red dots over here. So there is, even though it's a somewhat simple network, it's got some challenges. And just real quick, we did do data collection for this effort. But I do want to do a call out to the county and the city of Lathrop and the city of Manteca. They have also been doing a lot of traffic counts, and they were happy to provide their data to us to defray the cost of us having to do new data collection. And you can see here, and Sean will later talk about the study area intersections, but there was quite a lot of good data collected for this study. So I want to touch real quick outreach and stakeholder involvement. We do have a project website. I encourage all of you, if you haven't already, to get on the website. As you can see here, since October 6th, we've had a lot of traffic. So a lot of people viewing pages. We've had 321 unique visits. Even in the month of September, we've been going for a while. We're still getting unique visits. So we're getting traffic. But the one thing that we didn't really get a lot of is comments on our social pinpoint site. You might be asking, if you don't know, what the heck is that? And you go onto our project website,
and you'll see the social pinpoint interactive mapping tool. You can click that open and it kind of works like Google Earth. You can go to a precise geographic location and provide a geo-referenced comment. And it's a great tool and it's still open. So anyone can get on and provide input, whether they know a location where they've, there's an issue or a problem, or they have a idea in mind for an improvement at a specific location. Feel free to go ahead and tell us what you think. Okay, so obviously trucks are a big component of the traffic problem in the area. And so I'll have Garth of my staff discuss how we developed the truck volumes for this study. So Garth, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everybody. So as part of the truck trip generation, there were a few different pieces of data and things that we used in order to develop that information. First, as Jim was talking about on one of the prior slides, we collected some traffic counts that helped us gauge the classification of the existing vehicles that are on the roadway. And so that was collected in a number of locations to this study area. And so for the truck trip growth, we primarily focused on trucks that were three axle and larger. And a couple of the key things we did: one, we reached out to stakeholders through a survey system. We received some data from them, both in regards to the existing traffic patterns that they have today, what their projected growth is over the next 20 years, and also any information about seasonality that those trucks are having. And so from that information, we were able to pull together some assumptions for background truck growth over the next 20 years. We accounted for a 25% seasonal increase in truck traffic against a typical month. We also included a 50% growth over what was collected out there today. One other piece of information that was useful is, and that we looked at separately, was for the UP site. Through the work that's been done for that site, we have some detailed information about the future trip projections for that, and so we also went ahead and applied that information as well. The trips from that site are looking at growing closer to 300% of what they are today, or 300%. So it's about 170 to 200% increase of what's out there today. Let's go to the next slide, Jim. So what we can see over here on the right, here's a quick summary of daily truck trips at some of the locations along the corridors on Roth and Airport Way and Lathrop. And so we can see that the numbers that are given there, the number outside of the parentheses is the existing daily truck trips, and that's the total of both directions. And then in parentheses, that is the projected total looking 20 years out. And so you'll see for many of those cases, it's about doubling what is out there today. You know, some's a little bit less, some's a little bit more, but roughly doubling what's out there today. And one of the other pieces of information that we were able to use was we had some origin destination data, so we're able to verify, what ways that those truck trips are distributing, whether they're going to and from 5 or 99, and then from the north or from the south. And so we use that information too when we were developing those volumes. Jim, back to you.
Yeah, so thanks, Garth. And just for folks that get a feel for this, yeah, we analyze trucks separate from passenger vehicles because we really wanted to make sure we were as accurately as possible addressing the truck growth, because obviously trucks take up more space. Their passenger car equivalent is about 2 cars, 2.5 cars. So it was very critical that we really isolated and meticulously looked at that component of the traffic. So we're going to talk about baseline operations, and I'll pass it over to Sean, who's our task lead on operations.
There we go.
Let's try that again. Can everyone hear me this time? All right. So we looked at a number of items here in establishing our baseline for the corridor. First thing was reviewing safety data for the most recent 5 years available. So that would be, given that there is some lag time in aggregation of safety data, we were looking at 2015 to 2020 timeframe. So prior to the COVID pandemic and changes in traffic patterns that occurred over the last 2 years. We looked at operations analyses, both with Synchro for our wide range of intersection study area, as well as VISM for a micro simulation analysis of Roth Road itself, and looking specifically at the railroad crossing. And then finally, we used NPMRDS data to review speed and travel time reliability across this region. So starting off with the safety collision data. So for the 5 years of collision data that we reviewed, there were 354 collisions across this entire region, roughly 70 per year. There was no trend increasing or decreasing across the time frame analyzed in regards to a safety trend one way or the other. In terms of collision types, generally rear end and broadside, so intersection-based collisions made up the majority of our collisions. You see on the map on the right there, that's a heat map of where the collisions are most occurring. So you see that French Camp and Airport, as well as a few locations on Lathrop stand out as particularly high collision trend locations. In terms of type of collision, this is very consistent with statewide averages, where speeding and improper turning movements are the number one collision factor, number one and number two collision factors in this more rural region for the that classifies the majority of this study area. And then looking more specifically, around 13% of the collisions across the study area involved trucks, and around 3% involved ped bike, primarily those collisions occurring on Lathrop Road, which is part of what's driving analysis work. So as you saw on the previous slide, just pointing here, we have the overall heat map, and then the center map here is our intersection-based collisions and frequency on individual intersections. So again, we see here that Lathrop and Airport and French Camp and Airport stand out within our safety data. And then similarly, the segment collisions, we see that Airport and Lathrop Road are standing out as a higher collision trend than the rest of the region.
Yeah, and I'll just point out the intersections. It's anything that happens within 200 feet of the intersection, and also driveways are included in this analysis for.
Yes, thank you, Jim. So
yeah.
Intersection just means that it occurred within the influence area of the intersection. So these next 3 slides we'll go through fairly quickly, but this is just summarizing the traffic count data that we have at our 28 study intersections. This will be available in the final project report, as well as available upon request, since I know this is too small to read on these slides. So this is just more showing the locations that we are studying as part of this in our wider range analysis area. So next slide. Jim, yeah, thank you. So this is more of a high-level summary of what our analysis is finding. Keep in mind that this analysis done in Synchro does not account for feedback between intersections. So as an example, if we look at Harlan and Roth, that stands out as having a higher level of delay. Those cues from that intersection do spill back into the interchange. So even though the interchange is showing as A through C, we are aware that that's not typical operation for you guys out there experiencing it in the field. But this gives us an idea about where those problems are occurring out there existing. So the previous slide showed the AM peak hour. This slide shows our PM peak hour results. So again, we see up at Roth Road and the interchange, as well as along Lathrop Road, there's a number of locations where delay is increasing. Similarly, up at French Camp, we have a few that are getting into the LOSD range. So a lot moderate level of congestion. So that all being said, the next level of our analysis was to look at this in a micro simulation model for VISM or Roth Road itself. So if Jim, you can go to the next slide. So there's a lot of data in this that makes up this particular image that you're seeing here. We're going to be showing 4 sets for each of these scenarios. This first one being a rail crossing event at the eastern track spur that crosses Roth Road. So the way to read these is that dark green means vehicle travel is going roughly at the speed limit where you want to be traveling. And then it goes through yellow, orange, and then ultimately red. That is relative speed decreasing compared to the desired speed of the driver. So think about this somewhat as what you would see from, say, Google Maps when you're reading it. So red being a high level of traffic congestion. So again, we see here that the Roth Road interchange has a high level of traffic congestion during the PM peak period. That's being designed and dealt with through other projects not related to this study. So that will be different in our future baseline analysis. This is just looking at existing conditions. If we move to the next slide here, this is when a train goes through on the tracks. We see that queuing and slowdowns emanate out from that eastern rail crossing and end up blocking the driveways both at Sharp Depot and at the Union Pacific Railroad driveway. This is part of what drives traffic to turn right out of those driveways and continue on Airport out to 99 or to go down to Lathrop to access I-5 when this queuing occurs. And then if we move through the next couple of slides, we see that that queuing does dissipate within about 20 to 30 minutes of the track event occurring. Our next batch of slides is going to be looking at a rail crossing event on the western tracks. So similarly, you're just seeing the same congestion pattern as what we showed in the last slide to start with. And if we jump down a couple slides.
Yeah, I did. So the first, second.
Go one more, 2 more. Okay, so here's where we have our western track event occurring. You see that in this case, it causes significantly more congestion, especially into the interchange compared to what we saw with the eastern track event. That has to do with it being closer to the interchange and these queues going back to that Harlan Road intersection, which then starts to interact with the other congestion points, bottlenecks that we see across this system, which makes it much more difficult for the system to recover from one of these Western rail track events. The queuing extends for approximately 1,200 feet in either direction at its peak related to the rail crossing. And then if we move to the next slide, you see that once that event has finished, it actually worsens congestion through here as that traffic is released to the rest of the system and attempts to navigate its way through this higher volume section of the corridor where there's more driveways entering and exiting Roth Road itself. So our next batch of slides is what happens, and this is a theoretical, what happens if we have events at both tracks separated by approximately 15 minutes of time. And again, we're looking at these for knowing that there is going to be increased rail traffic and increased truck traffic along Roth Road in the future based on growth of all of the various businesses out here. So again, we see the Eastern track event happens first, similar queuing to what we saw with the previous Eastern event only, where that queuing starts to block off the driveways at Sharp Depot, Union Pacific, and starting to get back towards those distribution centers out to the east at the corner of Roth and Airport. If we move to the next slide, the eastern train has cleared, and now the western track event is occurring. And again, we see that the eastern track event queues have not fully cleared, and they're now hitting the back of queue forming from this western track event, resulting in queuing that we see across this entire Roth Road. And this is with
I'm on a
existing
Zoom meeting here, so I'm trying to be quiet.
across this entire corridor. So we start to
Okay.
see
Well, he'll call you.
more than a mile.
I got an
length
email
in,
today, so
queuing.
he's still at it.
Would you mind
Oh.
muting your microphone, please?
No. I'll call you back, okay?
So we see that significant queuing begins to develop, and then once that western track event clears, all of the traffic that has been held up between those two rail crossing events hit the interchange all at once, which results in significant slowdown for on Roth Road all the way back to approximately the Sharp Depot, which is what's instigating the need for some of these alternatives that Aaron will go into more detail.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And I'll just point out, all these simulations were done based on existing traffic volumes. So this is under existing conditions. So when the future volumes, we're going to be analyzing those, and it's going to be much worse than what we're seeing under existing conditions. So let's keep that in mind. And then, okay, I'll pass it over to Aaron from Mark Thomas to talk about the improvement concept renderings. And I will emphasize that anytime you draw a line on a map, people think this is something that is real. And keep in mind, these are just concepts, and they're not designed. And they're basically, the need for these concepts is to generate fairly accurate planning level cost estimates for the improvements, and to give folks an idea of what the concepts could look like if they were implemented. So I'll pass over to Aaron.
Thanks, Jim. So I'm going to walk through a few of the measures that we're looking at. And the first two are extensions of Roth Road to the east. So Roth Road currently ends at Airport Way. The blue line shown here is an alignment that is consistent with the City of Manteca's, I guess it's called the draft final general plan update, in which case Roth Road would be extended easterly, southeasterly with an intersection at Union Road, and then continue to the east with a new interchange at 99. And that location is dictated by spacing requirements between interchanges on 99. So this is approximately a mile south of French Camp and a mile north of Lathrop. And you see two other circles there that I didn't cover. There's some local road connections to the Roth Road realignment that would be connected in as T intersections. Another option would be to look at connecting Roth Road to the north to French Camp. There's a lot of flexibility with an alignment that would continue north. Walking through the three options shown here, one would be extending Roth Road to the east and teeing into Union Road at an intersection, and cars would then travel up Union Road to access French Camp. Another option is to head north a little bit sooner in between Airport Way and Union Road, and develop a new intersection with French Camp. And lastly, one carrying further east, and then somewhere near the existing road of Leduca, Roth Road would turn north and tie into French Camp. Any further east, there's challenges because there's railroad crossing, and existing traffic signals that we would need to keep some distance from. So that's kind of as far east as we were evaluating. Okay. The other two locations were grade separations, providing access of Roth Road up and over the railroad and eliminating that conflict with the railroad. This is looking at the westerly grade separation over the Fresno subdivision. You could see the interchange at I-5 just to the left of the page. There's these black dashed lines. Those are either new connections or planned connections. So Harlan Road is planned to be realigned to achieve better intersection spacing from the interchange ramps and northbound ramps at I-5. That is approximately where the profile to go up and over the railroad would begin. And it would be carried over to the east and touch down near Vallejo Court. We show reconnecting McKinley Avenue underneath the grade separation through the Army Depot and then back up to an intersection adjacent to that cul-de-sac. Our understanding is that the Sharp Depot has a potential for redevelopment. And so we were trying to utilize some of that space for reconnecting in the local road network. And then at the travel center, the Flying J, the profile of Roth Road would be to a point where access couldn't be provided directly off Roth Road. So we show a potential connection to the travel center off of the realigned Harlan Road. Okay, I think the next slide just shows a profile. There's a there's
Hi, how you doing? Pretty good, pretty
Hey
good.
Jim, I don't have administrative privileges, but maybe
Well, I thought they did a pretty good job.
I've never had to meet
looking at some
somebody.
of the different options there.
Sure.
So I was pleased with that and,
I'm not
let
sure
us
who this
have the study
individual
a little
is.
more. But I think they're getting closer to something that might be
Yeah.
doable,
Oh, man, like the microphone. That's just my system. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I could try to.
Yeah, that's, I was gonna quiz them more on that, but I didn't
Oh,
at
wait,
the end.
wait.
No, that's right. But I'm presuming that they mentioned Modesto, that other districts are
Jim, are you-
doing some of this.
Jim,
I
are you able
presume.
to,
Is it?
There we go.
Got him.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, carry on.
All right, I think we accidentally changed slides through that process. Okay, yeah, so this is a profile. This is looking at the alignment of Roth Road going up and over the railroad. So we have a minimum vertical clearance that we have to maintain over the tracks. And that's kind of what dictates our touchdown points on either side of the Fresno subdivision. We span over the UP right of way, and we would normally transition to embankment or dirt and transition to just roadway. However, because of the constrained right of way along Roth Road, we were looking at carrying the structure a little bit longer and then transitioning to wall to minimize right of way impact. Okay, and so the last location was the easterly grade slip over the Oakland subdivision, very similar to the one I just discussed. That rectangle that's shown in gray, that's the limits of the structure, and then we touched down near International Way on the east, and then right where the kind of the local roads go into the west. That's where the profile would touch down on the west side. On the west side, we showed reestablishing frontage roads, again, because our profile of the roadway off Roth Road will be high, and we want to provide a frontage road to maintain access to those properties to both north and south. The UP driveway that heads directly into their yard is approximately 8 feet lower based on our initial look. And so we showed closing off access there and then reestablishing access via international. However, it could be designed in a way that the UP driveway is maintained. There would just be some more improvements to that access point to reestablish that. And then lastly, the profile, again, these are dictated by minimum design standards to be able to get up and over the railroad as efficiently as possible.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. And keep in mind, as we complete the forecast of our intersection analysis, there will be likely the need for spot improvements at several intersections, channelization improvements, so on and so forth. And keep in mind, there's also plans to widen Roth Road to 4 lanes. We're also looking at the possibility of widening that to 6 lanes as well. So we'll be taking a look at a number of options on Roth Road itself, and then intersection spot improvements for those intersections that have deficient movements as a result of future traffic. So I want to talk a little bit about travel forecasts. A lot of the work we've shown thus far has been based on existing counts. So for the travel demand modeling and the forecasting of future growth, which we have talked about a bit, it was driven by land use from San Joaquin County's general plan update, the city of Lathrop's general plan, and the city of Manteca, their draft general plan update. So those 3 partners provided their information that we use to input into SJCOG's countywide travel demand model to generate passenger vehicle demand in the future. In terms of the network improvements I alluded to just a bit ago, there's already some projects that are programmed, meaning they have an identified funding source and they're in the queue for implementation. But there's also planned improvements that are in SJCOG's RTP, Regional Transportation Plan, that are financially constrained, meaning that projected revenues that are coming to the county for transportation improvements can cover those improvement costs. They just haven't identified the exact funding source for a given improvement. So there's programmed improvements and then there's planned improvements. So real quick, and Garth has already mentioned this, this is our existing truck volumes, and this is based on the counts. And so just take a quick look at this, and then Garth explained, and you've already seen some of this, how truck volumes specifically are anticipated to grow in the study area. And that's what these look like. And we can flip back and forth, looking at this segment on Lathrop Road, roughly 760 trucks, and that's projected to grow to about 1,800. There you go. So a lot of these locations more than double in truck volumes. Moving on, there's the total volume, so that's the trucks that I just talked about, and then all the passenger vehicles. This is under existing conditions. So in 2042, 20-year projection, you can lock in on any one of these locations if you're interested to see how it changes. And then here's the future. And again, depending on location, everything is roughly doubling, and if not more. So that's the projection. And then you're probably wondering, well, what, we talked about those extensions of Roth Road. How is that going to change circulation? And Sean and I flipped the coin to see who gets to talk about this, and he won. So I'm going to let Sean talk about it.
So I will preface first with explaining what it is that we're showing on the screen here. So red links are showing where volume would be roughly increasing on the major streets. Green would be showing where it's decreasing with the shown alternative. And then blue is the new roadway. So there's nothing to compare base. So that's a full volume as opposed to a change from the 2042 baseline numbers. So you see here that with the extension of Roth Road and connecting up to French Camp, that we can expect decreases on Lathrop Road and increases along Roth Road itself. We also see an increase in the utilization of the French Camp interchange and decreases in volume along the length of French Camp. In other words, it makes some of the transition between SR 99 and I-5 more attractive to do along Roth Road rather than along French Camp Road itself. But this does relieve congestion both along Lathrop and French Camp in the future, which are both anticipated to be highly utilized interchanges, both at I-5 and SR. So then if we move into the next one, this is looking at the extension with a new interchange at State Route 99. Again, similarly, we see significant decreases along French Camp Road and along Lathrop Road, with increases on Roth Road as we establish a new connection between I-5 and 99, as well as establishing alternative routes for the industrial developments on Roth to access both freeways. If you recall back to the earlier slides of the total volume in the future case, we're decreasing volumes along Lathrop Road by about 10% of their future totals. And again, these are all daily numbers that we're talking about, and we're decreasing them by around a third on French Camp with these alternatives. But we're also increasing the volume on Roth Road itself by 50% or more with these alternatives, drawing more traffic to that roadway itself, which is part of why we are looking at these grade separations for the rail, is that with this increase in demand, there would be a much more significant need to separate those operations from the rail operation.
Yeah, and obviously with any extension, it puts more emphasis and more traffic on Roth Road, hence the need to widen Roth to 4 lanes minimum, and perhaps even 6. But based on these volumes, well, these are the deltas, but we would take a look at that, see what needs to be accommodated to accommodate that demand. So the one thing that we didn't show you is the future operations at the intersections. That information is still being processed and QA/QC'd, but that will be available soon. And I would say would definitely we'll be happy to share that information as well. In terms of the big next step, that's what's called the Nexus and Fair Share Assessment. What does that mean? And this kind of gets to the role that urban economics will have for the study. So after we get a complete listing of the capital improvement projects that are proposed to accommodate the future demand, and that could be 1 or 2 of the crossings, that could be either one of the alternatives for the Roth Road extension, either the French Camp or new interchange at 99, which is more expensive, but that's the whole idea. I know the city of Manteca is far more favorable to the French Camp connection. It is cheaper and it is very effective, or as equally as effective as the southwesterly or the southeasterly extension with the new interchange at 99. Given that, we'll do the capital improvement planning level cost estimates. Those cost estimates will generate one side of the equation for developing a fee. That's the cost that needs to be covered by future growth, future development. As I mentioned before, we will do what is called a select link analysis or fair share. Using the model, we can track all the new trips that are using these new facilities, where is that trip beginning? Is it coming from the unincorporated county or within the city of Lathrop or Manteca? Based on that, we develop a percentage fair share, and that would be the share that that local agency would be responsible for, or their new development would be responsible for if a fee was developed. And I will point out that the figure over to the right, this is from San Joaquin County, and it just shows that when they were updating their fees, they look at per lineal cost estimates based on actual improvements that have been constructed. And as everybody knows, materials and construction costs have dramatically increased. So we'll be using that information to help guide our funding level cost estimates. But once we have the total cost of the improvements, then we develop a funding plan. How are we going to pay for that? And that's where we get into the concept of a Roth Road Joint Powers Authority that can generate its own revenue through a fee program that new development would pay into, depending on how much traffic a given new development contributes to the study area and specifically to the improvements that have been identified in this plan. So that would be the revenue that's generated here by the JPA. That would be then combined with other reasonably anticipated funding that is coming into the study area. I've already mentioned competitive grant funding is something that would be a very strategic thing to do. And I know SJCOG, it's one of their key functions as a regional agency is to make sure they can go and get that state and federal funding and bring it into the county. So that's a possibility. And then just through their regional transportation plan and transportation improvement program, the funding that naturally comes in to the county, that could be Measure K, which is a local source, but it's also the federal funding that comes into the county as well as the state funding, and that they program and distribute to the member agencies. And so that will all be combined to hopefully have a financially constrained program that all this revenue holistically will be able to pay for the capital improvements identified. So we'll be looking at the JPA formation concept. As part of that, it's very important to note that there is the local fee programs, and then there's the regional traffic impact fee program that SJCOG administers. You can't make development pay twice for the same improvement. So it's going to be very important that if this goes through, that the improvements identified are not reflected in the RTIF. And then also they are not reflected in the local fee programs as well. So there'll be a bit of a process to make that happen, but that way everything's kept separate and clean and there is no double billing. So last is just the performance metrics, and I won't go into this, but again, this relates to the need to be competitive in state and federal grant programs. And all those grant programs are very performance-based. So there's a number of measures of effectiveness and things of that sort that typically equate to a benefit cost assessment. So you need to quantify the benefits to society, and you have to factor in the cost for the improvements. And typically projects that have a very good B over C, meaning that they basically pay for themselves in a very quick amount of time, very quick return on an investment, that they get selected for state or federal funding. So that's something that will be the last step that we do after we've developed our analysis. And with that, that'll conclude the presentation. We have about 12 minutes for Q&A. I do want to point out that if you're interested in learning more about the study, Ryan Niblock is the project manager for the San Joaquin Council of Governments. Again, I'm project manager for the consulting team, but we do have also for DKS a outreach manager, and that's Kendall Flint, and this is her information. So with that, I'm happy to open it up for questions. We have a couple chats. And yeah, a couple of folks have asked for the PowerPoint. Would you be okay? Yeah, everything that you saw today will be posted on the project website. And I know there's a recording of this as well, and that will also be on the project website and made available.
This is Steve Harum. Would it be possible for you to email me the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we can do that.
Sure. Yeah, if you want to leave your, I think obviously we have your email address because you were invited to this, but so Sam, yeah, we can accommodate that.
Great, thank you very much. And I did have one question. I like what you're doing here, and you're looking at the City of Manteca's general plan update, but it's presently processing a huge residential project of over 1,400 units immediately next to Roth Road, and it's actually in the public comment period for the draft EIR. And my question is, have you taken into account the approval of those 1,400 units under the current general plan, which unfortunately isn't even part of its sphere of influence? And if you don't take it into account, what does that do to the accuracy of the study?
Good question. And I think this came up last time, Sam, which you were kind enough to pass that along. We did work with the City of Manteca to reflect the land use that they're currently moving forward with as their preferred land use. So that development is reflected in these forecasts that you see.
Are they included in the financial forecast? Because if it's an approved project with a vested tentative map or a DA, it might not be responsible for paying its fair share for these improvements.
Yeah, that's a good point. The devil's in the details. Based on the planned growth, if there wasn't a special district arrangement that was already established, yeah, that would be, obviously development that could pay into a fee. If they have another arrangement that precludes that, but that's why we have Bob Spencer. We'll get that figured out, but yeah, that's a good point.
But that project's moving very quickly, and they may escape paying unless that issue is addressed earlier rather than later.
Yep. Anyone else? Don't be shy. Okay. Well, if there are no questions, we can give you maybe 5 or more minutes back of your day. Ryan, is there any closing comments that you would like to make?
Nothing special, just keep your eye on the website, continue to provide feedback if you have any, or any concerns. We don't want to obviously get to the end of this thing and feel like we've missed something. So as always, reach out to me if you have anything. niblock@sjcog.org. Thanks everyone.
Yep. Appreciate your time. Thanks, everybody.